Hello, and welcome to Office Hours. It's a show dedicated to answering your questions about media and virtual production. Our producers, our producers are you. Here, you get to be the producers because you get to tell us what material that we cover. We're here to answer your questions about media and virtual production. We have an expert panel that's here to answer your questions. If you'd like to ask a question, go to our website at officehours.global. There you can sign up and get notified by all the shows that will be coming in the future. Be sure to check out our schedule where we see our special guests and our focus interests throughout the day. Also, there's free labs and training sessions available. So really the community is the best part. So Brian will be reading the questions for us today. Brian, what do the producers have for us?
Thanks, Josh. Our first question's from Adrian Albach in Brisbane, Australia. The new DJI Fly app does not have the ability to put in a stream key. So how does one connect it to an RTMP server?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yes, I didn't even know the Fly app could do RTMP. So they took something out, a feature out that some of us didn't even know existed. And I've used the DJI app for a long time. So what you want to do is the best way to get it out of there is to have the larger control units have an HDMI out. You take that HDMI out and you run it into something that can actually do a high quality compression instead of the RTMP that's coming out of a little app that added it as a feature. So they probably took it out because it wasn't producing a very good quality. And they realized that having that little FPGA try to do that was probably not going to work. So I will bet that there was a lot of macro blocking at times from a little device like that. Trying to do 1080p compression is not what you want. What you want to do is you want to have that HDMI out, and then you're going to take that HDMI out and run it into whatever else you want. It can be a laptop with a modem. It can be a live view. It can be whatever you want. In fact, we're going to be doing it with live views in the fall. Then you're going to get a nice, clean output from wherever you're at, and it's going to look a lot better. So think about HDMI to compression.
Yeah, we were putting our minds together in after hours yesterday with Adrian, and I think the reason for it, I hadn't got a chance to see what the RTMP quality is, but the reason is that the controller that has the HDMI out costs more than the drone. If it has acceptable quality, we're trying to find it, and they did change it.
Maybe for review, if you want to, if you're just having someone look at what you're doing so they know where the drone went. But I can't imagine that little controller, especially an inexpensive controller, is going to produce an RTMP output that was worth anything other than possible review of what you were doing. That's, and maybe I'm wrong, but there's a lot of people that have tried and failed to make cheap little RTMP streaming.
Okay, very good. Let's go to our next question.
Paul Valhus from Austin, Texas asks, is the Samsung Odyssey Ark 55-inch curved monitor revolutionary? Comment?
Jeffrey?
So I saw the Ark at CES this year, and since then it's I think it came out this week. It was a very interesting monitor, revolutionary. LG's made monitors like this, not to the 55-inch size, but you can definitely it's 3 monitors that you can turn it into one. And of course, you can go horizontal or vertical on that. And of course, when it's curved, when you go vertical, it's really, I'm not a big fan of looking up like this while I'm trying to take a look at a monitor. For gaming, it's going to be perfect for anybody doing any type of Twitch gaming or anything like that. It's going to be perfect on that. And of course, for regular monitoring, I suppose if you're just monitoring web pages, it's fine. For streaming, not so much.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I agree with Jeffrey on that. I don't think, as a gaming monitor, yes, but if you're doing critical editing, I question something that's that curved, whether or not you can create circles and squares properly and have them remain dimensionally correct as you're viewing it. Because if I'm doing my graphics work on After Effects and I want to have a circle, how can I tell it's a circle when I'm dealing with a monitor that's distorting the image that I'm viewing? So that would be an issue with me. I kind of like the idea in editing, as long as you can see the picture properly. But the idea to have the auxiliary screens off to the sides is nice. The other thing to use, just use a sidecar type monitor. It doesn't have to be a huge one, but one in portrait mode is kind of easy if you just need to throw a few menu items that you need there.
Alex?
Yeah, I think it's a great gaming monitor and immersive monitor that you may want to look at. I'm kind of interested in the idea of turning it to the vertical orientation and then stacking like 3 or 4 of them, or 5 of them, around, because you'd be able to build a really immersive experience. So if I was going to test them, I would ask them for 5 of them so I could put them all in vertical mode and have this giant cockpit that was sitting in front of me that was lots and lots of pixels. And then I'd run something like Microsoft, the flight simulator.
Have you ever tried a vertical curved monitor?
No, but they saw it there. I've never even thought of a vertical curve monitor until I saw the pictures on their website. And I was like, you could make it vertical and then you could put a bunch of them next to each other. That would be amazing. And so anyway, I'm threatening to build a really nice flight simulator at the house. And so I've been looking at monitors and I looked at this one. I was like, oh, I have to put that on the list of things to look at after I, look at the $5,000, flight controls that I want to get. It'll have to wait for a little while.
Have you used vertical monitors in general, Alex?
So the last time I really used vertical monitors in any level was when this was probably over 30 years ago, when we did page layout. So we would run when we were working in PageMaker and we were doing Aldus PageMaker, and we'd turn it vertical so that we could see the entire long sheet that we were printing, and for newsletters and all kinds of other things. And for I don't remember what we produced, but we produced a lot of stuff in vertical, and it was way better because we didn't have to scan anything. You could look up and down, you could see what it would look like when it was unfolded and at full resolution. So we definitely used it in vertical, but that's probably the last time that I've.
It's a selfie view for monitors.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, but I messed up. But you gave a nice explanation. I meant curved. What is your experience with curved monitors?
I've sat down in front of them and thought, wow, this would be really good for gaming. But you couldn't do anything else with it. You can't have anyone walk over. You can't see it from an angle. I'd much rather have lots of flat monitors. I think that the curved monitors create a geometry that is really hard to get them to do what I want to do. So I've definitely sat down and thought this would be really immersive if I was doing flight simulation or gaming or anything like that. I'd be really into it. But it would have to be multiple ones, and they'd have to be stacked together. And what I'd like to see is one that's bezel-less or very close to bezel-less, so you could build kind of an array. Then an array of curved monitors tight together. That interests me. Like that would be kind of a cool, like 6 of them, like around you, that is formed. I think that would be kind of a slick experience.
I think the terminology they use for the arc tells you how big a circle you can make, depending on how much they arc with it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so when you patch them together, you can build a nice arc around you. So if I did something absurd with them, I think I'd enjoy them. But just one by itself, I think maybe gaming.
Yeah, that's mostly where they're looking. I'm thinking on the vertical orientation. I wonder if it would catch your lighting more and have more reflections, because typically they're just meant to just go around you in a horizontal thing.
I mean, it would depend on where your lighting is. I mean, it's just, so if you tilted it down just a little bit, we'd probably have the same thing. Although to your point, you may get more on the bottom. So you may have, it does create a much more complex geometry to try to work with.
Someone should try it and tell us about it.
Yes.
Jeffrey, go ahead.
Yeah, I think doing any type of VR thing, I think you'd have way too many lines that would mess that all up. But the other thing is that when I work on video or photos or anything like that, I love the fact that I have multiple monitors in different brands and different resolutions. So I can look at my 4K monitor at the photo and see what the color layout is going to look like, and then move it over. I have an older Asus that I use for just basically holding up anything that I need to, like web pages and things like that. But I'll take that over there to see how the colors look, how the resolution looks on those older screens. So I just like having multiple brands because they're all going to have different color schemes to them.
I will say that the bad side of using multiple different monitors, I found out my little touch screen, like Wacom version Dell monitor, can only be at 59.97. Everything else is at 60 for mine. And I had some that's the only resolution I can put it at. I'm not sure why, but So yeah, there is that. That's the nice thing about the uniformity. Go ahead, Peter.
I was just thinking about what Alex saying about building the circle of vertical monitors as a gaming thing, and doing some back in the days when I was doing some simulation design work. I realized for a 3-letter agency, just leave it at that. But we were doing it with multiple monitors stacked vertically, but we had to position the chair, what the person was sitting in, so that they could actually normally look down and see something, normally look up and see something. If you just put the vertical monitors on top of your desk and curve them up, there would be no looking down. You couldn't look down in a natural way. So there's some things there. But I agree also with Mitch that, where'd he go? There's Mitch. Is I've actually tried to do engineering graphics on a curved monitor. That did not turn out well because I couldn't get the lines to actually stay parallel.
Go ahead, Mark.
So we have a design studio here full of engineers and architects, and most of the people are using 43-inch monitors and they're flat, they're not curved. When we've gone to larger monitors, we found that it's too hard for them to read the small print you'll have on a set of construction drawings at the outer edges. So the curve might be good in that sense, but I understand Peter's point when you start to look at door swings and everything, and they're out askew a little bit because of what that curve is doing. It may present a problem.
Yeah, that's good. Let's go to our next question.
Simon Ray in Shrewsbury, UK asks, we haven't seen Alex's telestrator demo for a while. Did he want another chance to refine his presentation of it and give some ideas to our newer viewers?
Go ahead, Alex.
Sure. Yeah. So how my telestrator works is that I have an ATEM switcher. I have a Mac Mini, and I have a Wacom tablet. The Wacom tablet has two connections. One is HDMI, and the other one is a USB. So what I do is I connect the USB of the Wacom tablet to the Mac Mini, and I connect the Mac Mini's HDMI to the ATEM, and I connect the program from the ATEM into the Mac into my Wacom tablet. So the Wacom tablet is seeing the program of the ATEM, and the ATEM just simply has a downstream keyer on. The application, the telestrator application that I had developed, and I haven't gotten updated yet to a place where I'm willing to let other people use it. Mostly, it's not because I'm trying to hold it back from everyone. It's just that it's not stable. So anyway, so I have to restart it every once in a while. And so which doesn't bother me, but bothers other people. So anyway, so so it is. So what it does is it's just black on a white screen. And the only controls I have are how to make it bigger and softer. So if I hit the buttons, I can make a thicker line and make it a little softer. And then I just use the downstream key, and I use it as a key, and I use the fill as the fill of the, in the ATEM downstream keyer as the color. So it's just one color. So it's a little limited that way, but otherwise it's a relatively simple little thing to do, and that's how that works.
And there's lots of different ways of making telestrators. Alex, yours is focused on the hardware-based use. You have your hardware set up.
I mean, there's other ways to do it. In my experience, this is the best one. It's just the most expensive one too. So it requires a Mac Mini and a Wacom. So I'm using the Wacom One, which is only $300. I mean, for Wacom, that's not very expensive. I have a 2012 Mac Mini that's doing like an old Mac Mini that I pressed into service, and so I don't know what it's worth. Probably $50, $100, or something like that. So it doesn't require very much CPU power, and it might be why it's crashing, but well, who knows? So anyway, so so it's a relatively. I mean, it's if you get an old Mac Mini, it's $600, $700 to do that. If you already have the ATEM, that you're using there. The problem with the other ones is that they either have more lag. So a lot of people try to build telestrators. I think at least a lot of people I know try to do telestrators because I'm doing a telestrator. And a telestrator is, in meetings, it is so awesome because you're going, well, really, we're here, and then we want to get over here, and then you're going to do this, and this is going to come back around, or you really want to think about, you want to think about the box, and whatever you're building, It's really nice to be able to talk, and it's very impressive too. People get, people like, whoa, look at that. So, so anyway, it's a really great thing to have. I've seen a lot of other versions of it. The version that this is very low latency, near zero, where I can see what I'm drawing and I have control over the pen. And so that's what I haven't seen in other telestrators. Is usually you're not looking at the thing that you're drawing on. I think that we could build something better, but we're working on it. But haven't found another way to do it yet.
Well, have you thought about a mobile telestrator, something you could take on the road, or is it just something you're just like
hours? I spent 2 hours talking about that yesterday. So yes, like specking things out.
If only I had my telestrator.
So no, if you had a really good telestrator on a mobile app, you could do a lot more than just telestrate. But we'll leave it at that for now. It's really
what if you had like a little key you put on your finger and you could just go.
The problem is that you can. What's really useful about the telestrator is that you can see what you're drawing on. It's not that useful. Like because I can sit there and go. Like I was talking to someone a couple of days ago about keying, and I went, so the only thing that matters in the key is this, right? So it's this area here and this area here, and you don't care about anything out here. You just want garbage mats to do that. And you're really just caring about this edge and how do you manage the edge and what you're doing here. Now that would be what I just did there would be very hard if I couldn't see what I was talking about. And that's that's why being able to see it and be able to draw right on it is really useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, John.
I've been spending my summer teaching myself how to do telestration and downstream keying. And a couple of things I learned was the difference between a downstream and an upstream keyer. And make sure you use the downstream if you're using a telestrator. Yes. And to solve the problem as far as not wanting to buy a Wacom tablet, I actually have an app I got from the Mac App Store called Presentify. And I just made my second display totally black background with an auto hide of my menu bar when I'm using it. And I use my iPad as a sidecar device. So I'm drawing on my Mac screen using that Presentify app. And it works okay. It is a little bit fidgety and sometimes breaks.
How do you find the latency with sidecar?
It's not perfect, but for what I'm doing, it's fine. One thing I like about the Presentify app that helps the latency is you can draw straight lines or ovals or rectangles, and they're perfect so that it helps me keep in the lines a little bit better.
Can you reposition them?
No.
That's the thing. Like drawing them. The problem I find is I've done ones where you can draw perfect circles and then you have to try and figure out where the center of it is when you start, because then you want it to be like just over here, or like if you wanted to be able to move them around. John, are you using your finger or are you using the
I use the Apple Pencil, but I already had that, so it was no additional cost for me.
Okay. Do you find the experience better with the pencil, just more precise, or?
Definitely more precise, and I don't know if you've ever tried drawing with a mouse, but it just almost never works out.
Oh yeah, it looks like you're drawing with a mouse. Go ahead, Mark.
So, Alex, this may be a Sunday topic, but if two people were on Zoom and both had telestrators, could you then play tic-tac-toe? Because I think you can go first.
I think that I would need to.
You can barely see it.
So the problem, it's funny. If I had more outputs out of my ATEM, I could do it. The problem I have right now is when I want to show something that's in program in my ATEM, of course, it goes into video feedback. So that's the challenge. But otherwise, yes.
There's a rumor that Office Hours 3.0 will be able to play tic-tac-toe with our panelists. Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm thinking it would be cool to develop an app and call it just air quotes. And it does hand gestures and writes the quotes right there for you. That's
amazing.
It. Just
that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Let's go to our next question.
Slightly non sequitur.
So next question comes from Samuel Nordvik from Norway. For those on the panel that use the Behringer Flow 8 into your setup, how have you configured it?
Good.
All I was going to say, I didn't know if anybody, John may have, John, do you have it? Do you have the Flow 8?
Yes, I do have it.
I'm gonna stay out of it. I was going to say, if we didn't have anybody here, I would say Carl has one. He's on Tuesdays. But anyway, go ahead, John.
Tuesday is the better day to ask. I am a very simple user, and basically on my inputs, I just have one XLR in for my microphone. What I like about the Flow 8, though, is that I can control my monitor mix, so I can control my own audio back to myself. So on the monitor side, I have my max audio feeding back into my ears, and I control that independently from my output. It's really simple.
Yeah, I've got mine on a mobile setup, so just very simple. And you do have the option to put in a Bluetooth input, so you can put a phone in for its input settings. Let's go to our next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, what techniques are useful for building and sustaining a sense of community, even with large audience sizes for online events?
Start with Jeffrey Powers, and then maybe Alex has something to add.
There's a lot of things that you have to put into consideration when you do something like that, especially because no two people are alike. Even in this panel, if we were to do something to do community building, one person might like it, one person will go, "Yeah, okay, that's nice," and another person will go, "I just don't want to participate in that. I got better things to do." But with that said, there's a lot of cool things that you can do depending on what the event is. I mean, like for instance, I was just at an event a couple weeks ago where they sent everybody, and I should have grabbed it, the little pull thing. They're like little sharks. They're like little grabber hands, and you bring them up on screen and have a conversation through those guys, and that was a lot of fun. But I wouldn't do that for something like a financial group and a conference like that. Maybe I would, and just by giving everybody something to work with, maybe lunchtime, you give everybody Uber Eats or a Grubhub gift certificate, and then they go and they order their food, and then you can have a lunch type Zoom situation, or gifts. Alex talked about the wine. He's probably going to talk about it again. But have different things that where everybody's kind of showing off what they've got and how they use it, and just have a lot of fun with it. Or have some games like Elephant. Alice Guy talks about the Elephant comedy group, where you can just pass along, make stories, and just have some fun.
Alex, what do you do for more community?
So I was thinking about how to answer this question because Jeffrey had a lot of good details. I'm going to be a little bit back up just a little bit on my general view of communities, which will give you an insight into how we work here. There is there's us, right? Different people that are here. But the reality is there's a bigger us that is this, right? And I didn't write that very well, but you want to think about it like this being the group, and much of what we are, of who we are, is very similar. And then we have our opinions about politics and other things like that that are out. They're out here. The key to communities is getting people to focus on this part, not have them focus on these parts. Unless you want to make these parts the center, which is really hard. That's the harder thing to do. It's harder to sustain. And so having people see the bigger self versus the smaller self is really important. So when you think about building communities, you figure out ways to have people not talk about the things that make them different and look at the things that have them see the similarities, which is most of it, right? And you also create a community that you create a current in the community, a current that if you are going towards what the community was designed to do, you're going with the current. And if you're going against what the society was there to do, you're going against the current. and it doesn't mean that you're kicking anybody out or you're moving anybody around, and things are harder one way and easier another way. And you do have to think about these things. You have to think about these from a community perspective to figure out how to develop one. The things that do that, the actual actions that do that, are things like voting and polling is a nice way to have people feel connected. And it's a good way for you to get a sense of whether people are paying attention and whether they're doing things and whether they're interested. But other things are, obviously conversation. being able, we do this thing every day, and all we do is ask for conversation. Like, just, the producers hand us things to talk about, and then we talk about them. And so we're having this conversation. The producers are part of that conversation in a forum. They also have their own conversation. They're in the event chat talking to each other. So these conversations tie us together, talking about a unified experience. So conversation, shared action. One of the things that I've talked about before is, if we had a flamethrower that we let people use emojis and comments to light the flamethrower up, and it just went crazy. People went absolutely. I was talking to somebody in LA. I said, "Yeah, I worked on this event that we had this flamethrower and the ice," and they were like, "You did the flamethrower?" Like they were from some other company. They were like, "I was watching that," and anyway, and I was like, and it crashed like 3 times, and they're like, "We didn't care." Like it was great. So, but the point was, is people were really excited about it, and they were able to do something. So finding things that people can be excited about, that they can potentially be successful at, but takes effort that they do together, pulls them together. And
was it a flamethrower or was it not a flamethrower?
It was the one I did with a flamethrower was a flamethrower. It actually fired a flame 40 feet long onto a piece of ice, and all you had to do is type fire. And we were getting over 130. We had 130,000 viewers. We were reaching nearly 150,000 interactions a minute. Like it was, we couldn't believe what we were watching. like it was
before the popularization of the not a flamethrower.
Yeah. I mean, this was long ago. This is a real flamethrower. Like it was.
So you had the original flamethrower then?
I don't know if it was original. People have been using flamethrowers for a long time. So I don't know if mine was original, but I didn't build the flamethrower. We hired some guy from LA that, some special effects person that makes flamethrowers. It's like
listen, folks, this is an important detail. We need to know these things for production details.
Exactly. But we will reproduce the flamethrower. I mean, that's all I'm saying is there will be a flame, just so you can see how it worked. But anyway, so that's the key is that you want to look at things that people can do together, that they can produce together, that they can talk about together, and you want to and in whatever area that is. It doesn't mean if it's politics, then it should all be about that politics. If it's religion, it's about that religion. That's their similarity. For us, it's media, so it's about media. But the key is to try to keep people focused on that, but allow them to, see the similarities between each other. What usually tears things apart is people pulling at what their own pieces of that puzzle, and which is everybody's individual, and we want that. But you want to have them constantly being reminded of how they're similar to each other.
There's more that unites us than divides us. Challenge
theoretically
is getting them to see it.
Exactly.
Go ahead, John.
One of the classes I teach our new hires at our call center is conflict resolution for customers who get on the phone angry. And we use a framework from family systems theory called triangulation. And the idea behind triangulation is in every relationship, there's 3 aspects. There's 2 people, and separate from the 2 people is the relationship between them. And if you are in conflict with somebody else and you view them as the enemy, you end up fighting them and attacking them as a person. And what most marriage counselors do is they'll help a couple, for example, and I'm a certified marriage counselor, is how I know this, and they help the couple see the problem as external between the 2 people, and they triangulate the 2 people against the third problem. And any community will grow closer if they have a common enemy. And you can do it in a very toxic way, like politics, or you can do it in a very beneficial way, like office hours, where the problem we're seeking together is these questions come up and we band together as a community to tackle them and help each other succeed. And so you can use triangulation or a common enemy to help grow that community internally.
I'd just like to take a moment to, off of John's comment, to say you'll never know what expertise we have here on the panel. So put in your questions. And even if you've stumped our very diverse panel, nice thing is our community will see it. So oftentimes they can give you extra answers.
I just want to point out that John created a new word that I'm going to use in there. He just said it very quickly, but a tackle. That's a whole new thing. It's attack and tackle, a tackle. I think that should be in the Webster's. I mean, that was such a great word. I'm going to try to use it. I'm going to try to get by with it in Scrabble later today.
We could come up with our own little.
I like it. No, I'm
word
serious.
Add that to your dictionary, Josh.
Yeah,
there we go.
We have to have the office hours dictionary, which is just a whole bunch of new words. And but a tackle. tackle is really good. I really like that word. All right.
Fantastic. Mitchell?
Just listening to everybody talk here, John and Alex and Jeffrey, I feel that I'm, in the midst of superior brains analyzing things, and it's kind of fun. My only little analogy that doesn't match up to everything else everybody's saying is that the way the planets formed, it always had to start with a grain of dust somewhere, just a tiny little grain, and then it attracted other like-minded dust particles. It eventually became a thing, and then gravity took over, and it just started attracting more and more. I kind of feel that happening here at Office Hours, is that it's an idea that Alex came up with, and we've all added another layer, add to it as we go on, and as it begins to evolve and continues to move forward out into the universe, I think we attract more and more people, like-minded people, and the people that are in it become more like the other people in terms of we think that way. I mean, I think differently because of my experience here with After Hours. So, getting back to the question, that sense of community is shaping the way I think. I can only speak for myself, but all that critical attraction seems to be working in the right way.
Can't hear you, Josh.
You could say that in the form of Carl Sagan. Mitchell. Go ahead, Alex.
Billions ticking and burning away in the cosmos.
One of the things that Mitchell was talking about reminded me of it's not Sunday morning, but it's Saturday morning, and we've got time. There's not a lot, there's a thing in fishing called a floating. I call it the way I heard it was a floating attraction device, but it's also called a floating aggregation device, which is a fad. And it doesn't. What's interesting is that I really felt like fad, the word we use for like moving trends or whatever, really was coming from this, but it's not. Fiddle faddle or something like that. But anyway, so fad has been used for a couple thousand years. The Phoenicians used it. Turns out, if you take a pile of junk that will float and you throw it in the ocean, fish will aggregate around it. And the theory is that, the little fish have somewhere to hide. Suddenly they were out in the wide open ocean, in the middle of the Indian Ocean or the middle of whatever. Now they got a place to hide. So they start hiding there, but there's not enough room for all of them. So they're all swimming around there. And then little bigger fish that eat those fish go, wow, there's a lot of them over there. We can just eat them when we need them. We can just graze. We don't have to be wandering around. And then bigger fish go, wow, look at those fish. And before you know it, you've got a full on community of fish, thousands and thousands of fish that are all floating around a fad, and how fishermen use it is they use what they call purseine, which is that they throw this piece of junk in there with a GPS. They just let it float around the ocean, and then they go there and they find it, and there's a little fad here. There's a little fad here, and they have their little boat, and they take a little boat and they run a net around it, and then they pull them all up and drop them into the boat, and that's how they get them. And unfortunately, they get a lot of what we call bycatch because of that. But if you don't do the fishing part, so the purseine part, it is something that, in many ways you have something that gets everybody excited, and then folks start to show up. And a lot of those folks, those first folks may not be the most experienced, but they're committed to it. And they're figuring out, you get a handful of experienced people who see this action going on. And then you get, bigger and bigger, people with more and more experience start showing up because there's value. In it, there's value in that community. And so, but it's very similar to the dust particles. But I think about floating attraction devices a lot, because I did a lot of animations about it. Obviously, I know a lot about it because I was working for a company or an organization that had to do lots of animations about fads. So anyway, but it's a really interesting thing that you see actually in other things in the world, not just fish.
Yeah, those anecdotes that are better than reality are fantastic. I have to say, grandpas have been getting away for this for years before Google.
Food are friends, not food. Or fish are friends, not food. Anyway.
Brian, what do we have next?
Simon Ray from Shrewsbury in the UK is back. A tank may be a bit bulky to take to IBC, but would it be sensible to take 80/20 wheels and a couple of metal sheets to build one on site and disassemble it at the end of each day? That might be easy to stow among the crew.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I was wondering, at what point do we draw the line between building a tank and a Jabberwocky device that's going to get us flagged down. At some point, somebody's going to say, I don't know what that thing is, but it could be a thermonuclear device or something like that, and we might get flagged. If it looks more like something that you typically see in that environment, chances are it's not going to be flagged quite so easily. So if you need a pre-built thing, maybe a sound card, because you've got the ability to clamp things onto it, put poles on it, and storage space and rack space maybe if you need it. And it's already built, because you may have a lot of other things that you're working on that require your attention.
Yeah, but the 80/20, it's scalable, Mitch. You could scale it.
Yeah. You could build a Jackery.
Brian?
Yeah, look, I think the plan is actually to go backpacks and bags and be much more portable. There's going to be 3 teams on the ground crew, and so they'll be having the 6Ks on monopods, or I know Richard's been testing out the iPhones and the 6K on the Ronin gimbal, but I think we're looking for stability with the monopods, and also just being able to get around. It's a very large area, IBC, and so you want to be as light as possible.
Jeffrey, you've got some experience on the ground.
Yeah, if you try to Frankenstein anything, especially on the fly, that you're only asking yourself for trouble, because there's a lot of things that can happen, especially if you're moving things around. When we did our live streams on set where we had a set, Frankensteining some stuff wasn't a big deal because it didn't move, and we had it nice and secure, and it passed all the rules of at the time CES. So checking out all the rules to see what you can do and you can't do, just as Mitch said, because you can get denied access in if they feel that it's something that's not only that they don't know what it is, but it could hurt somebody. And of course, if you start moving it around and it starts falling apart, then you have a whole new problem, because it's not smooth floor that goes through. You got to go through carpeting, you got to go through bumps where all the cords are coming through and everything like that. The best thing to do is, as you guys are doing, put it in backpacks and keep it as light as possible, and go from there.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Alex?
Someday in the future, if we're successful at all of this, my goal is that we would have a booth there, that we have a set that we can interview people and have roundtable discussions and so on and so forth. We'd have a tank, and that we saw a little bit. But the cool thing is that tank would go at night, just be able to roll into the booth, so we don't have to take it off site. And then you have 1 or 2 backpacks that are wandering around, and then a couple iPhone crews that are just gathering footage, and or smaller crews. And so that's where I'm hoping that we can get to in the next year or two, where you have a couple different things that are going on. But the goal there is that we really are producing content 10 hours a day, with different parts of teams and people taking breaks and doing whatever. And it's just like the world stops around these events, and we are able to, jump from the studio to the tank. The tank basically, and I will admit, I never thought that a tank was possible until Noah built one. Like, I never thought you would do that on a set. Like I was like, he's working on this thing. I'm like, what is he working on? You just need a backpack. Because I've done this for 20 years and all I've used is a backpack, to do these. And I was like, I don't understand what all this work is. Then he shows up and I'm like, whoa, that is cool. Like that was like way more than I expected. And so I think that we could refine that, that tank experience. But basically it's the way I see it now, after the engineering that the teams did for the couple events that we used it for, is that is our moving studio. That is the multicam. It's got 2 or 3 cameras. They might be PTZs. They are, they're all set up in it, and we can very quickly set it up. Like I've even thought about, having that, having 3 of them. Maybe there's something that we can do wireless. So literally, we can take the PTZs out. And, I was even thinking you could even swing the arms out, so that you have like the center camera and you have 2 cameras that just kind of swing out, that you can have a multicam of somebody at a booth and really create a high quality thing. And again, I wouldn't have thought that you could get away with the tank, but it seems like everybody was fine with it. And I think that as long as you talk to the organization beforehand and you put logos on it and has big press and all that other stuff, we're just going to get a lot of attention from it, which would be great. So anyway, so I think that the tank is part of this puzzle. I wouldn't do a tank for multi-day execution without a booth, because taking it on and off site would be a pain. But you could just, the idea is we build the booth to roll the tank in. Like get a 20 by 20 booth, then there's a place that the tank goes in and gets locked up for the night, and then it comes back out again. And then we have, but again, I think you want some more mobile units as well. And the hierarchy in my head right now is that when we don't have a booth, we should just use backpacks. And when we have, unless we're doing some kind of coverage, the tank is really heavy for that. But I think that the backpacks work well in a lot of those environments. And we're going to hopefully test a lot of live view opportunities in the fall to kind of figure that out. And then, but I think a booth would help. And a booth also, again, gives us the chance to run over and grab people, bring them over, have them show us stuff, talk to us about things. And so, and the mixture of all of those things, I still think we as a group could produce the highest quality coverage of these events. I mean, you really think about the incredible work that the IBC team's doing right now of having 10 people on the ground and 30 or 40 people in the cloud, and everything else is quite a thing. Like, nobody's ever done that before. Like I just want to make sure you're clear. Like we're just hacking it together, and they did a great presentation yesterday, but I was in the middle of the presentation watching it going, yeah, nobody's done this. Like, nobody's ever had 40, 50 people like looking at coverage, because they couldn't, they couldn't make that work. And I think that we can get to a point where we have 100 people working on it, all over the world, and, 15 or 20 people on the ground, and, and we're really covering it. And it really changes. I mean, I will say that from what it positions our group in a different way, and it opens up new opportunities. Live View is lending us a backpack because of the stuff that was done in June. And if we keep on turning that dial up, we'll get to the point where we get the resources that we need. And it also means that we get better people on for second hours, and we get more access to things, and we get more to test. And, instead of me buying all these mics, people send them to us so that we can test them, that kind of thing. So all of those things help, this positions us to learn faster, if we can do it, and we get to do something together. We talked about building community, and doing things together is one of the best ways to do that.
Yeah, Noah had a ATEM on the tank, and he had a nice tight wide switch out that he was able to do.
It worked really nice. It was genius. I was, again, when I saw it, I was like, there's no way they're going to let him do that. And when I saw him building, I was like, what is he doing? And it was genius.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, we could go on and on about building things, and we will. Let's go on to our next question.
Thanks, Josh. The next question comes from Alex Knight in Vancouver, BC. I want to build a lighting truss for some Parcan lights in my studio. I have some C-clamps, so I'm thinking some inexpensive piping from Home Depot. Any recommended materials, plastic or metal, and something that snaps together?
Oh, we've got a lot of thoughts on these. Go ahead, John.
I went more towards the Alex side on not using inexpensive stuff, and hopefully Dennis has my picture queued up and show you what I did with my stand-up desk next to the wall where you've got no room behind. Dennis, cue the picture. So I have two auto poles from floor to ceiling, and then between the two auto poles, there's a piece of truss. And then from that truss, I'm hanging several things. And then those two light cans, they're iCan and they're DMX controllable up above. And this worked out really, really well. A little bit more expensive, but it's super sturdy, and it worked out well for me.
Good job, John. I do something similar, but desk to ceiling for the poles. Go ahead, John.
I went a different route. I used IKEA Ivar system, and I just have two of the Ivar poles. I have two shelves on either side of my desk, and I just put two poles across the top. The reason I raised my hand is, my question is, what is it about wood that is so anathema in the audio video industry?
Splinters.
Combustible? I don't know.
Splinters.
Go ahead, Mark.
So I've heard a lot of different materials mentioned to try and do this. I've heard the 80-20, which isn't round in profile, so it's kind of hard to clamp things to sometimes. I've heard the conduit, which you can dent pretty easily by over-tightening any type of clamp to it. And I'm wondering if by the time you spent your time and all the time shopping and going back and taking things back and bringing them back, wouldn't it be better just to get a pre-engineered truss that's really in the long run not going to be that much more money, and just hang the truss across something.
All right. And Alex?
Yeah. So I want to define a couple things there, is that there's truss and then there is speed rail. And speed rail is what we build grids with. And sometimes we will use truss to support the grid. And then we have, then you have 80/20, and then you have maker pipe and other things like that that are great, for some of those pieces. And so those are the things that you want to think about. Plastic is not something you want to use because it's too easy to break. You just dig into. I mean, you might be able to get PVC. You probably could get PVC, but it would bend down unless you got really big PVC pretty quickly. It's not really built for what you're trying to do. We used to use PVC all over the world for. We had these little packs that would do our green screen, a 9 by 9 foot green screen, and we'd cut it into 3 foot sections with little connectors, and we'd throw them all into a bag. And so I had this like duffel bag that was a 9 by 9 screen that was relatively light, so the PVC worked for that. But you'd have to replace the PVC every once in a while because it would just be slowly worn out, So about once every 6 months we'd get, which would cost like $40 or something. So the main thing is that, and the reason, what I mentioned before with wood is that lots of splinters. You put it together once, and that's the time it's going to get put together. Otherwise, you keep on drilling holes in it, and it's a lossy, construction system for a lot of us. And as far as the metal of the lighting truss, what a lot of us use traditionally is a lot of us use the speed rail and what's called Hollander connectors. Hollander makes these connectors, and someone else makes a knockoff of them. But these are the connectors that will connect your speed rail to each other. And I've built most of my grids with that connection. The speed rail is inexpensive. The connectors are expensive, but there's some Hollander makes some really nice ones. There are some knockoffs that are pretty good as well, that are a little less expensive. It doesn't seem like, oh, well, the connectors, there's a lot of them. Like, just look at anything like that. You'll end up with a lot of connectors. And so it turns out to be an expensive piece of your investment. Most of my grids that I built in little rooms and so on and so forth have been, they run in $2,000 or $3,000 by the time I finish buying the connectors. The speed rail is easy. You get a chop saw and you buy them in 20-foot lengths and you're done. The truss is nice because you can go longer. So a speed rail, you really shouldn't run more than, 20 feet is a long way. Maybe really more like 10 feet, 15 feet is about as far as you want to run speed rail before it's not going to be, really manageable. So truss now is basically a zigzag, with the truss, because you've got, basically 3, and then you're connecting them into parallels. And if you look at it like this, it's zigzagging like this. This is a very sturdy structure. Then you can run it a lot further, 20, 30 feet in that structure. So, or more. We've run truss, square truss as much as 30 feet wide, 30, 40 feet wide. So you can get long, wide pieces without anything in the center. So you can kind of work on those. The one thing I will say about the C-clamps is probably not what I want. What you're looking for to attach things to pipes is cardellini's. So cardellini's, basically the difference is that they're a wide structure. So if you look at it from the side, it goes like this and like this, kind of curved. And then you can tighten it. But the main thing is, and it's got a baby pin coming out of it. But these are designed to grab onto pipe. And you're going to have a lot of them have little rubberized pieces on the inside. So it really notches onto that, and you're going to find a much better grab with the cardellini's over the C clamp.
Go, Jeffrey.
Are the cardellini's just like the stuff you get from Manfrotto? Is that the clamp that you were thinking of, Alex? Because that's what I was going to go.
I don't know what Manfrotto makes. I just know you're talking about the Mayfer. There's a Mayfer. A Mayfer is like a square thing that is it's got like a up like this and down like this, and it's square, and it's kind of like a cardellini, but a cardellini is its own thing. If you do a search for, and we'll get the founder of, that's a Mayfer. So what Mark is showing there, and I just don't have a cardellini within reach. I don't think. Hold on, what do I have? I have all Mayfers right now.
This is a Manfrotto.
That's the Manfrotto Mayfer.
Yeah.
So a cardellini is kind of like a Mayfer, except that it is longer, so it has more surface area against the pipe, and the tightening mechanism is a lot more detailed. So it's much easier to work with a cardellini than a Mayfer. I have lots of Mayfers and I use them, but they don't have the same grab and they're not as easy. They don't have the same sturdiness as a cardellini will.
Yeah, but so I use a lot of the Mayfairs, and so I love the flat the single trusses, because the other thing you have to worry about is cable management when it comes to anything that you're putting on the ceiling. How you're going to move those around, and if you have to move them around, if you got to extend the cable, and how it's going to hang. My overhead truss system is something that I've used for many years. These are basically either shower rods or curtain rods. They can handle a lot of clothes, so they should be able to handle any type of lights, LED lights from today. And I've put a lot of different things on top of that. That works from there. And of course, I have those bolted to the ceiling, double bolted, where if for some reason the clips that you'll see up there, if those were to fall down, there's an actual second set of clips that will hold that bar together. But I've never really put that much stress onto the system from there. So that's probably, you can get those anywhere. They go up to 72 inches, and they're like $20-$30 for the pipes. And you can do a lot with those, but they're definitely not the pro end model.
Probably have a second hour on grip gear. But is Mayfair a specific brand of this? Because I'm seeing Manfrotto list this as a super clamp too, but maybe same thing, different manufacturer.
Maybe I've been calling it the wrong thing forever.
Okay, but, Mitchell.
Yeah, I use a Varipole, and here's a shot of the setup, and it's set up horizontally. And if you look at the top there, those are all super clamps of various ilks, but they clamp onto that big Varipole. And also, I'm using, if you see on the left side, I'm using scissor clamps with super clamps, scissor clamps with super clamps, to make sure that it connects to the ceiling, so it has another point of contact. And you would be surprised how much rigidity is created, because before, without the scissor clamps, the pole would kind of bounce up and down maybe a little bit. But with those scissor clamps, I've got two of them, one on either side of the screen there, one above the light and one on the left. It really secures that pole. So that's a very good mounting point. So I've got 2 or 3 lighting fixtures set up on that pole, including that long LEDGO LED bar light that splashes some color in my background. So you can get away with a lot of different things without going to the trouble of putting a big truss in there or building some giant contraption in the back of your studio.
The only thing I'll say about the giant contraption is that it's really a pain and expensive to do it once, but what equipment you buy and how you set up your environment will define how you use it. It will define, how creative you get with it. When I have a grid, I'm constantly moving my lights around. Like, I'm going to put them over here. I'm going to put them over here. I need another mic. I need another camera. I need another whatever. And that grid took a lot to put it up. But once it's up, you're just constantly moving things around and making adjustments that you would not do when you have a simple setup. You have that setup, and if you know exactly what you want and you're going to keep it that way, it's fine. But having a grid all over your entire ceiling means that you're going to constantly be evolving, where you tend not to do that as much when you are once you set it up for what you have defined how that's going to look, rather than having it undefined and adjustable.
You're not wrong, Alex. Yeah, the setting it up and the repeatability and moving things around definitely plays a part in it. Mark, did you have something else to add?
Yeah, sure. So a couple of things. Wood is combustible, and before LED lights, you had a lot of heat with the lighting system, so that's why they stayed away from wood. In addition to it, when you go to put a lot of pressure on a point in wood, you can dig right into it. So when you try to clamp things down, it just takes form and changes shape, and it doesn't work very well. The other thing I wanted to mention is you're hanging things overhead. When things fail, there's this physics called gravity, and it tends to pull things down very quickly. So make sure you use your safety straps and your cables, and try and keep everything from falling on people's heads.
Mark, you make a very poignant and sane safety considerations, which is another thing. However, I saw in Alex's question, inexpensive. So, Alex, I'm going to do you a solid here. So, one of the things we've talked about is the Mayfair or super clamp thing to hold things. And one of the issues is too much clamp force if you put it on the EMT or the pipe, or it actually doesn't have a lot of, this does not have a lot of strength this direction, right? It has a lot of strength this direction, does not have a lot of strength this direction. What you can do, the small rigs also are worse, but if you combine them, you can get these little attachments that you have. This is what you'd put on a camera to mount several hot shoes or flashes. Has the 1/4 inch outputs on it. So what you can do is you can spread these along. You can get these at different lengths too. So the more physics moment you want. Distance. Yeah, there you go. The more you spread these apart, the better they are. You can get these that are a foot more. And so this is what I hold my, right now I don't have a hair light because this is what holds my hair light onto the vertical pole that goes from my stand to the top. That'll give you a much, much better hold for anything that's going to go this direction, much more solid on that. And this has the little adapter thing I had to have a vertical mount for it as well. The extra side effect of it too is that it gives you two 3/8 mounting points on each of the quarters. So I saw inexpensive. And if you are, well, all of the caveats apply as far as engineering something as opposed to something that's repeatable, movable, and taking on the site. But yes, if you want to get into the engineering and buying things from the place that if you don't need right away, AliExpress is your friend. But anyway, next question.
Next question's from Eric Antonio from Washington, D.C. Some of the previous LiDAR 3D conversations have hinted at staffing needs. Will there be training opportunities, labs, or understudy positions associated with those needs? Or are those mostly for experienced professionals?
Alex?
Some people like to transplant trees into their backyard so that they're ready when they're there. Problem is you don't know if the roots are going to take, and a lot of times they don't work out, and sometimes they're not as productive as you thought. Other people, like to use lots of seeds. I prefer seeds. So anyway, I'm a farmer. So we are definitely going to be doing training. The reason I bought the LiDAR was so that I wasn't only having it for a job. So I have a BLK360 that I was able to buy used from a friend of mine. And I'm going to be putting scans up. We're going to be talking about matching E57s, using Autodesk Recap, doing, building from there using SketchUp and other tools to build this out, getting those into Unreal. The reality is that what I want to do is not just, and we're going to bring professionals in to talk about it. So a friend of mine, Fred Fikert, is probably one of the world experts in LiDAR. It's like there's probably 10 other people in the world that knows what he knows about it. And so he's going to, we'll bring him in I don't want to bring him in until we have a basis of understanding, because it's hard to understand Fred if he really gets into it. And if you don't already understand most of the basics, because he's really building, he's building the geodetic network. He helped build the geodetic network for San Francisco, where you can measure anything in San Francisco down to like 4 centimeters. So his understanding of it is so big that we have to get ourselves ready for that. But the goal, though, is to bring other people in and other companies and everything else so that we can, and this LiDAR will probably be something we talk about at least once a month as we go through it, because as we go towards AR, VR, and as we go through a lot of other things, LiDAR will become more and more important, to what we're doing, and having a large number of people that can process that LiDAR is going to be important as well. If we can get it down to where it's not some, specialty thing that people are, that is very hard to find. Right now I can tell you that for surveying, people like Fred can't find anybody to work for them. Like there's just not enough. There's not enough resources, for that. And so I look at that as an opportunity for our membership to start to build capacity and capacity. And it's not just that they can't find someone to go out with a LiDAR and shoot it or survey it. They can't find people to process it. So once they've done it, Fred has to sit there and do the whole thing. And that's a horrible use of Fred's time. And so we want to find, we're going to, basically what I want to do is build lots and lots of training, lots of opportunities, bring people like Fred in and talk about this stuff, get people up to speed. And then a handful of you will really get excited about it and really get good at it. And then we'll probably send you some stuff to play with. And here's a little job and here's a little job. And if you're able to do those jobs, you'll get bigger jobs. That's how this works. So some of it will be fun stuff. The first stuff will probably be all training. Then it'll be like, hey, we're going to scan the NAB, like we'll scan all the booths, or we'll scan that space before the booths move in and we'll visualize it. Like what I'm doing right now is I'm scanning venues that I need to do production in. That's what I got. That's the other reason I got the scanner. So I go into that venue and I shoot 8 scans, which will match together, and then I hand them to Kevin in our group and Kevin Hansen. Kevin Hansen right now is modeling those venues in SketchUp, so that I have these SketchUp models. So now when we talk to the client about, here's what we find is that with the scans and with the 3D models, we come up with new production that we wouldn't do if we had to, because when you go into a venue, anyone who does these kinds of productions knows, you go into a venue and you don't know what you're going to get, and maybe you only see that, even if you do work with a venue all the time, you only see it a couple times a year. So you're figuring out what you're going to figure out while you're there, and you think, oh, this would be good the next time. Well, if you have a 3D model of it, you think about it all the time, and you look at it in different ways. We put a camera. We were doing these basketball games with an NBA, and I said, I want a shot that sits over top of the court, so that we can draw the offensive, to show you what offense and defense is doing, and it's not a shot that the broadcasters need, but it's a shot that I want to use so that I can telestrate over top of that and say, okay, look at what they're doing here. This guy's going to block this guy going by, and and explain all of that stuff. And they said, well, you can't do that because there's a jumbotron on over top of it, and you'll see it. And I said, well, I think I can get up pretty high. Well, what they didn't know, the person I was talking to didn't know, is that I'd already been in that venue and I'd already scanned it with LiDAR. And so I had already moved my camera. I had moved a virtual camera up there and looked down, and I knew exactly where I needed to put the camera so that I could get as vertical as I possibly could without hitting the jumbotron. And there happened to be a catwalk right there. So I knew exactly where on that catwalk to put a camera that no one had ever thought was possible, because, you just hadn't explored up there before. And so that's the kind of stuff that happens when you start to scan, and you start building 3D models of it. And then if you put it into Unreal Engine, you can now show the client, this is what it's going to look like. Like when we do a lot of round tables in these venues. So not round tables, but like a discussion of like 6 or 7 VIPs, and they're talking about a movie or whatever. And I'm getting, where I'm going with this is I have all those spaces scanned. I have a 3D model of them. I'm going to go into MetaHuman and find something that looks like the actors. I'm going to, put the MetaHumans into the seats, and we're all going to sit there and look at it and like, does that look good? And do we want to move but doing that by yourself in a lab is way better than doing it when there's, 20 people that you're paying a lot of money to do it, and you don't want to figure it out there. So those are the kind of things that we're doing. And so I want to move LiDAR for us past something that's just used in construction and visual effects and high-end solutions into something we just do all the time. Like we just LiDAR everything all the time. Okay, we'll just throw LiDAR at that. We'll just throw LiDAR at that. But to do that, we need to have more people that know how to process it. Like we need lots of people to know how to process it for themselves. It might be something that eventually Josh says, hey, can you send me that BLK360? I'm going to go scan some stuff in Pittsburgh. And Josh knows how to do it, or he knows somebody here that knows how to make that work. And not all those jobs are going to pay big bucks, but we're all learning how to do it. We're all making a little money here and there. We can sell it as a service. I mean, when I have someone else scan a space, it costs me $2,500. Like that's like for me to have a survey company come in and scan it. Now it's really well done. I gave one to Kevin Hansen, and he was like, did you do this? And I was like, no. And he's like, oh, because they matched the origin really, really nicely. He was very happy with how they built the thing. I was like, no, we paid a lot of money for that. So anyway, I think there's a huge opportunity for businesses. And I think that there is, as AR comes forward and as we start to digitize things, there is a future potential if we provide the supply. So this is something that's really important. There's many opportunities in the world that don't happen because the supply wasn't available at the right time. Like the nutrient has to be available when the demand, when the need for it has occurred, with AR and with lots of digitization, there is an opportunity where you want to define every venue, everywhere, all the time. The supply of people to do that doesn't exist right now. And so if we figure out a way to learn how to do all of these things, and the easiest part is the scanning. The scanning part is the easy part. Like I have a scan. It's expensive. I have a cheap scanner that's $20,000. I mean, I bought it used. I didn't pay $20,000, but it's a $20,000 scanner. The big scanners are $80,000 or $110,000. You know, these Leicas and ZNFs and Pharaohs and stuff like that are really expensive. But we can rent those or buy them eventually.
Is the scanning part the easy part because of the equipment? If you have the equipment?
Yeah, the scanning part's the easy part because you have really expensive equipment that just kind of does it for you. Now, there's a lot of things you have to know about the scan. I mean, it depends on what you're trying to scan too. Is it a scan where you're going to match points, or is it a scan that's a surveyed scan? Now, a surveyed scan, you use something like a Trimble SX10 or whatever, and what you're doing is you're pinpointing the position of the scan as it relates to other scans. And so you're building again, this network of connections that are very, very defined, and they'll tighten a solution down to something that is down to millimeters across miles, you know? And so that's a different solution.
Like the Smarter of our day, when he did the James Webb measurement with the points of the sunshade that I sent you, Alex.
I can't remember that.
They use these little balls, and they were able to measure. You can't do it in space, to where they had at different points of view and had spheres at different points, and they would measure, because when they're trying to simulate what this thing that they've never expanded the sunshade out, what it's going to do in space. And so they had to measure, they engineer just how much drag it had for it. And they were using the LiDAR, for it.
No, I remember what you're talking about. Yeah. So it was too far along, too far. You can't expect me to remember that far back. So anyway, so the main thing is that that there's a lot of things we would do with LiDAR if we had people who knew how to use it, who knew how to take an E50. If I give you 8 E57 files and you can give me back a 3D model it's not even that I can't find people to do it at any price. But if we got to a point where it was a reasonable price, where you're getting paid a reasonable amount of money to do it, but not an insane amount of money to do it, which is right now it's insane. It's insane numbers to get these things built. I mean, Mark can probably underline some of the stuff that but it's an insane number to get people to do it. And there's a lot of opportunity there below that to do things that are much more casual. But think about every venue, every building, every arena, these models don't exist of those things right now. And, there's a lot of opportunity if we had more people able to do it. So my intention over the next 2 years is to build, 50 to 100 people within our group that are really good at this, and there's no way to get good at this without doing it. Like, I'm just telling you, it's a bunch of stuff that's hard to think about, and then you'll get good at it. But this is one of those things that if people are interested in it, I'm super excited about having people, work on it. And that's why I spent a lot of money on my own, so that we as a group can learn how to do it. It's nice to have the scanner, but it's really so
Alex
for us
is willing to send you a scanner if you've got a BLK 140. That he wants scanned.
BLK 360, yeah. Well, once you were doing a lot of this for a long time, I'll send you the scanner. It's an expensive scanner. So, but right now, my goal is that we have a lot of people. There's no reason to send the scanner out until we have a lot of people that can actually do something with the data it's creating.
Yeah, and sorry, Mark, I skipped over your question. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to add to what Alex said, is that it is very difficult finding either companies to subcontract to or people with the talent to do this, because A, it's new, B, it's expensive. I know a lot of the companies that I know do it just rent the technology because it's changing so quickly. And the other thing is that the scanning, as Alex says, is not necessarily the hardest part. The problem is that the files become really large. And so when you're doing big spaces, trying to convert that into 3D models, either Revit or, any of the sources any of the programs that people might be using, it just takes a lot of computer power and a lot of time to let it crunch all those numbers, tons of numbers.
It really does It really does seem like we're in the infancy with DJI doing what they're doing, the photogrammetry, the AR. It really does seem like this is in our infancy. And Alex, is there a meaningful thing that you can do with an iPhone? Is that the bare little level entry point?
You could do a little room that you can do. The problem with the iPhone is it doesn't stay calibrated. So even if you're using something like Polycam, you wander around a big space, and by the time you come back to where you started, it's off by half a foot. And so then it has to recalculate it. So grabbing some data from the iPhone works great, but these scanners make it way easier. Like the scanner is, and the resolution is night and day. Like this is not, this is your iPhone captures, I think 584 or 587 pixels that's the resolution of the grid. The BLK360, which is a tiny little scanner, like it's the least expensive scanner you can get, is like 1 million points a second. And so it's just, it just, in 5 minutes, it's, grabbing a lot of points. So, and those points oftentimes are accurate down to it. Now they're not again, the BLK360 is not good for really large spaces because it loses accuracy. It's like 4 centimeters at 10 meters, which is not great, for one of these things. So it's not going to give you, but it does give you enough. If you make a dense enough mesh, it gives you enough to get, to get a small space figured out. As soon as and again, what I want to do is have something that gets us that small space. And then, when we, someday in the future, we buy a Faro 350 or a ZNF or something like that, but there's no reason to own those if I don't have anybody to use the data, so it's like, there's no reason for us to, and then, again, I think that there's a potential, and this is all up to the community. If we only get 2 people or 3 people, I mean, they'll get good at it and they'll be able to build a business around it, I think. But if we get a lot of people doing this, we're building a whole new industry from the ground up. It doesn't exist currently.
And it's being used a lot through construction industry. I know that with Boston Dynamics, construction companies are going through with Spot the Dog from Boston Dynamics and scanning entire facilities overnight to make sure they're on schedule and to check for which trades aren't following the right quality control.
Yeah. And it's they scan, I mean, I think I talked about it the other day, they scan dirt. Because they calculate the volume of the dirt, and you're like, well, we have to move, 20 tons of dirt. Well, you can't measure that from the truck. So you scan the pile of dirt, and then you fill the truck with it, and then you scan it again and go, well, that much volume's gone, and we decided this is how much what the density of the thing is, and that's how we moved approximately 20 tons.
Dirt is a huge part of the cost of a building. It's a huge part. You wouldn't believe how much dirt costs.
We had a conversation about contractors who will shave off a 1/4 inch off the thickness of the wall, and it saves them hundreds of thousands of dollars, on a really large building. But of course, it's not there was a reason it was a 1/4 inch thicker, as Mark will tell you. So anyway,
we won't talk about that.
Yeah.
Buildings have been removed because of stuff like that.
Yeah.
Moral of the story: dirt cheap isn't dirt. Isn't cheap.
I'm interested about the peripheral jobs that are coming out of this as well. I mean, like, where are they? Are they active and ready to take on all of the data that's being collected, or is that still a nascent industry in itself?
Well, I mean, the big thing is that there's lots of things that aren't happening because we just haven't done it yet. So again, the issue that you get into with this, and this is probably a whole nother, I mean, again, we're going to keep on talking about these in second hours, but we've got time right now. We're running out of time. I'm going to have to accelerate here. But I think that, like, for instance, tourism is now that COVID's coming, disappearing, or at least we're ignoring it. I don't know if COVID's going away, but we're not paying attention to it much anymore. As people start to go back into these tourist attractions, there is so much you could do. You could be seeing like what it looked like back in the day. You could have heads-up displays as we get AR stuff going. You could have, so you could be literally walking around with the Google Glass or whatever and looking up and seeing like what it looked like back then and then looking down. But all that stuff requires LiDAR. And the main thing is that, in any venue, you need to do what we call hashing the LiDAR, which is that you gather the venue and you break it down to just the most important components to identify where you are. When you pick up a phone, ultra wide bandwidth will tell you where you are. Ultra wideband will tell you where you are within 6 to 10 centimeters. the phone can now look at that hash of information and know where your phone is within a millimeter. And then at that point, you can put heads up things. We can give you directions. We can do all kinds of things. But that data doesn't exist right now to make that actually happen.
Alex, if I just wanted to scan something to put it in a presentation, is the photogrammetry sufficient for that, or should I use LiDAR to?
The real power is the mixture of the two, which is what we're going to get into. So we're going to be using things like reality capture, and basically what we call LiDAR is structured light, and then you have photogrammetry, which is unstructured light. And so the structured light gives you scale, it gives you registration, it tells you we know where this is. The unstructured light gives you resolution. So you're only limited by the resolution of your camera and how close you got to the object. And so, but it's not as accurate as the structured light. And so when you mix the two of them together, boy, like you can get down to the scuffs on the bolts if you want to, but also know exactly where they are on the earth. Like literally know that bolt is exactly here and have its moving point, moving data. Because when you start talking to people, about people like Fred, they're calculating like the movement of the plates, like everything's moving, to them, the earth is this, because they're positioning there, like it's going to be, half a centimeter different in its position in the world.
And that's all included in the USDZ file?
The movement of the plates? No,
the information about the lighting and
you could put all that stuff in the USDZ file, but it would be a really heavy one. The key is that you want to you get something with high detail, and then you have to get rid of some of that detail so that you can get back to like you would with the photo. Eventually, the 3D model is like the Illustrator or EPS file of the photo that you had. You might not be able to carry all those pixels, but you want to build a wireframe that's going to define what that is.
Okay. Very good. Well, we could talk
second hour. There'll be another second hour.
We'll have second hours on it as well. So we'll get into a more budget-oriented question from Chad.
Our next question comes from Chad Lafarge in Columbia, Missouri. Inspired by the previous home scan snow globe discussion, I'm looking at drones that won't break the bank. What looks good under $2,000 and has a good track record?
Alex, do you have a budget drone suggestion?
Well, I'm getting ready to do this project. This is the home scan. I'm fortunate that my parents don't watch this, or my family doesn't watch this show. So I'll tell you what we're working on. My daughter and I are working on. I'm going to go home back to Pennsylvania, and I'm going to build a 3D model of my parents' house, and then I'm going to build a snow globe with my parents' house. And my daughter has volunteered to paint them, so I'm just going to print them, and she's going to paint them. And we're going to put them into a little snow globe, and we're going to give them to my brothers and sisters and my parents. And that's my big Christmas gift. And so, which they will love. I mean, this will be the thing that very rarely do you get to give a gift that people, is going to end up on their desk or on, it's like a thing. And so, anyway, I really want the DJI, the new, I want to get more to the pro side of it, but I can't afford it. so I'm probably going to get the mini pro is what I'm looking at right now to have it. Now, Chad, if you want to split the money, and we both spend $2,000, we can get a really good one, and then then we'll just trade a couple of us could go together and buy a drone. that would be great. But we have to be really good friends because someone's going to wreck it. And so we, like that we have to all figure out how we're going to handle that. Anyway, so who pays for it when they wreck it? But right now, if I'm buying it by myself, I'm leaning towards the mini. It's got a 48 megapixel camera. Resolution is important. I'll shoot it in a good time of the day. And I think that it probably will do what I need it to do.
All right. Very good. Brian, let's continue on our budget
I think
theme.
Mark knows a lot about these things. I think he had his hand up on that.
No, I think it was left over from.
Oh, was it?
From last, yeah.
Okay.
Our next question comes from Chris Widener from Lafayette, Indiana. For doing high-speed playback live, we're doing water rockets for the library. What would be a low-budget way to do this? iPhone does $240. Is there any sub-$500 way to do better?
Sub $500. Alex?
No. Rent a Phantom. that's what you should do. Like if you're doing rent, you don't have to buy these cameras. You can rent them. Now the Phantom isn't still going to be more expensive. The Phantom's going to cost you I think it's like $4,000 a day with an operator. But you get everything together, you get everything planned, you shoot it with your iPhone, bring the Phantom in for a day and shoot everything, and it's going to be incredible footage and it's going to look great. But I don't know anything that's doing full resolution. So some of the older Sony cameras, the FS700s, would go up. The FS700, if you buy it used, it might do 480 frames a second at 720p. It does this weird thing where it'll do 960 frames a second, but it's like this weird long capture of it. So you might be able to find something, depends on how much resolution you need in your library. But a used FS700 had, or maybe it was an FS900. I think it might have been the 900 that had a buffer that would, suck up a really high, up to 960 frames a second. It was out a decade ago and obviously didn't do as well. And remember that when you start going up to higher frame rates, you have higher shutter speeds, which means that you have way less light. So like when, a lot of times when we do high speed, we ended up doing it outside, or we do it in a lot of places because it's too much speed. But anyway.
Yeah, that's the trade-off with you. Let's go to our next question.
Next question is from Craig McFarlane in Boston, Massachusetts. What are the trade-offs to consider between models of in-ear monitors from Linsoul?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
The biggest trade-off is the fact that Linsoul, I don't think Linsoul makes any of those models. What they probably do is they buy it from manufacturers that make different types of headphones, in-ear, over-the-cup headphones. Like, for instance, you have the KZZ-SN, which is a 5-driver in-ear headset that if you went on Amazon and looked for the KZZ-SN, you'd see like 50 different brand names attached to that headset. So Linsoul, you're just buying a brand for that matter. Now, on that same aspect, I've tried, they have the two driver, the 3-driver, the 5-driver. I don't think they go past 5, where it's basically got 2 high ends, 2 low ends, and a mid. And they're just super small. So the biggest trade-off when it comes to in-ear headsets is you have small drivers, and they're trying to compact everything into this small little piece that sticks in your ear. And that, for some people they like it, for some people they don't like it. Some people just don't like to have things stuffed in their ears. So those are basically the trade-offs that you just got to really do the research, and they're pretty inexpensive. So buy 2 or 3 different types of models and see which one works best for you.
Go ahead, Mark.
So one thing to be careful about are the cables that get attached to, that you buy as additional things for different length, have different endings on them. So if you go to this, if you look at this cable, it has 2 very small prongs that are used to connect to the earpieces. This one just has 1, small prong that connects to the earpieces. So you have to make sure you match up when you buy the different accessories. The other thing that's nice about this particular cable is that it has a slip ring so that you can pull it up behind your head and you don't get the cables wandering away from your ears.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I get the cheapest one. Not the cheapest one, but I think I get the, it's like $42 or something, and I buy them in packs of 5, like so that we send them out to people as needed for some of our shows. And I can't remember which one, but it's like $42 for the piece. I don't get the ones with the mic is not very good, so don't get the one with the mic in it. Just get the TRS. It works better in a lot of different things, and I'm really happy with them, and that's what I carry around. I actually like the less expensive ones better than the Pro ones, which I find harder to stay in my ear. And if I keep the Pro ones in for a longer period of time, my ears get sore. So I paid up to $150 for the more expensive Linsouls and found them to be very uncomfortable. And so I've gone back to buying these $42 ones, and they're great. For what I need them for spoken word. I mean, would I give them to a music artist? Well, actually, maybe I would. Depends on the budget. I mean, if it was Adele, she's going to have her own. But if it's a local band, I might give them to these. They'd probably be happy with them.
Have you tried the plush inserts on them, Alex, on the KZs?
No, are they good?
So they've got the little, they'll get tips. I don't, for whatever rhyme or reason, they'll throw them in to some orders. I get mine really cheap when you want something and you don't need it right away, you can get it from the cheap place. But yeah, every once in a while they'll throw these little plush things. I get them for my earbuds too. You can order the plush version. So instead of the silicone, which they have a better seal if you want that. But then some people like less of an airtight seal too. So it's less of an airtight seal. It's not going to block out as much ambient noise.
Well, it's the other thing that I worry about. One of the big things I like about in-ears is that they not only block out the audio going in, they block out audio going out. So that, especially if you're using like a large diaphragm like what I have right now, one of the problems you get into is that it's that you'll hear the headphone in it. So I like to keep them really sealed.
Yeah, I might try it. I'm not sure how much ear leakage you'd get.
Yeah. But with the plush ones, you have some of them coat them, so they are a little bit waterproof, but then that kind of ruins the plushness on there. One more thing I do want to say on the KZs. Yeah, absolutely. One more thing I do want to say on the KZs is watch out, because the first set of KZs I had actually had metal, the little pins that go in, they had like a little metal sleeve to tie it down on. That actually gave me little electric shocks going into my ear. So just to watch out for that if you get the KZ models.
It's not a defect, it's a feature, Jeffrey. I know Jens had said that there is a part that connects the ear tube. Sometimes those tend to break. He said with a lot of inserts, that's the part that can break. I will say too,
I find that the little metal grill will eventually come off after about a year.
It will, yeah. So yeah, what you do is order it from the slow place, and eventually your replacement will get there in time for when you need it. But I noticed too, they the AliExpress. Yeah, but they tend to accentuate the highs. So they're not accurate. But if you're doing what we're doing, sometimes that can help intelligibility. But if you want to listen for accuracy, they're not that accurate, but they can be decently comfortable. I know that we've had that, and I think the ones that I use are the and 10 Pros.
And to be clear, I don't use these for audio production. Like these are in ears for Zoom meetings. When I have audio production, I use over-the-ear, high-quality headphones so that I know what it actually sounds like. And so it's not these are great for what we're using them for, but you should not be like mixing logic using these because they're not accurate. They're not, that's not what they're good at, but they are really inexpensive and they sound, there's a lot of detail to them. And so they're really useful for what we do them in. But again, if you want accurate headphones, these aren't the ones.
Yeah. Let's go to our next question.
Our next question comes from Greg Greckmeyer from Topping, Virginia. Pros and cons of using a battery generator, such as a 1,000 watt Jackery for production work. DJ'd last night for 3 hours and only used 25%.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, these things are amazing. I actually have a company called Jenniverse. They were first called Ark, and then they changed their names because they were too confusing with Generac. And so I have a couple of those, along with Canon also has one, and a couple other office hours members. I did a live stream using their Home Power One, which is their smaller version. It's 1,000 watt, and basically when you use 1,000 watts, it says that you'll be able to, without recharging it via solar or via plug-in, that it would go for about 8 hours. And the live stream I had, I did 1 hour and only did 10%, which is great. Some of the cons to that, the first one is you can't push over 1,000 watts. Which a lot of the electronics we have today are not even going to get close to 1,000 watts unless you plug in a microwave to it as well and start making hot pockets while you're doing your DJ stuff. Overheating, when you're in a very hot environment, very cold environment, the batteries do get affected in different ways. So they could start draining or not working from there. And then finally, there are some auto off features on some of these charging units. So after about so many hours, they'll actually turn off the plugs to save a little bit of energy. I've run some long-term tests where I've seen that happen. And so just watch out for that. If you're doing a 4-hour show, I like it because it could be a great UPS solution. So you can plug it into the wall and then plug anything you need to, but always have something that's off that grid just in case that decides to shut itself off. At least you still have something going as you're DJing or live streaming or whatever.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I mean they don't smell as much as the gas generators, so they don't. Yeah, but you also can't refill them quickly, so that becomes more of a challenge. You can't. Once they're dead unless you can swap the battery out. And so I have the 500 Jackery, and I use it for stuff when we need to go out, and I need a little bit more than a UPS. I don't want a UPS. I just want something that I can sit down and. I'll be honest, I haven't run to the bottom of it on any test project so far. So, it's just for what I've been using it for things like the Starlink and other things. I got one because Chris Widener got one. He was talking about it. I was like, well, I'm just going to get what Chris gets. And so I got one, and I've been really happy with the Jackery. I am looking at getting something larger. We lost power. We had a fire yesterday, not at the house, but nearby. And they turned off all the, PG&E here in Northern California. It turns off like half the state every time there's a little fire. So anyway, we lost power for a while, and I think, I need more. I need more if you want something to be continuous, like the reason I'm probably going to get a gas generator, because now I'm entering fire season, is because I need something to be able to run half the house, or a natural gas generator. And Generac is what we're looking at. You need to be able to run half the house or the whole house for potentially 3 or 4 days. You're not going to want to do that with a battery. But one of the big advantages of a battery-based system is also that you won't have any ground loops. So one of the problems you get into in a local one is getting a buzz because you have a ground loop somewhere, and you won't have that. You won't have that with a battery. And I know some people that run their entire audio system off of car batteries. They have this little system, and they have it all set up so they can run the entire event off of it. And the reason they do it primarily just to make sure that they don't get any ground loops.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another thing to keep in mind is if you've tested it, make sure you test it under the same temperature conditions. So if you have really cold or really hot, that'll change your overall run times.
Especially cold.
Also, yeah, the cold will definitely run it down. Running the same things. If you are doing the transfer over for the generator, make sure you have your transfer switch properly engineered. Let's go to our next question.
Our next question comes from Jacob Goodnight from Indianapolis, Indiana. Alex, what mic are you using today? It looks different than your usual TLM 102.
I am using, I copied Courtney, and I got this is a test. I decided on weekends I'm going to always use a different mic. I've got so many mics laying around now, and we're just going to do shows with different mics on the weekends so that we can while we're doing R&D, I'm going to use the weekends as the R&D area. And so I tested this one, but this one might actually become the permanent mic. I actually think I like it at least as, I think I like it as much as the TLM 102. This is a Stellar X2, and it's designed to reproduce the sound of a Neumann U87. It is, I don't know if it does that. We'd have to have a Neumann in the same room to see how close they are. But I think it actually sounds, I don't know what people think on the panel, but I think it sounds like a pretty good mic, and it's a lot less expensive. It's $200, not $600. So having, this around, I think is pretty slick. So I'm pretty happy with it so far. And again, I may end up using it as my permanent. I actually like, the other thing I like is that it's black and it's a little less noticeable. And I realized if I wore a black shirt in meetings, you'd never even know that I had a mic sitting in front of me. It would just be like magic. So I'm surprisingly happy with it. So I mean, I knew it was going to be good because Courtney knows what he's doing. So I knew that I was a pretty safe bet. And it sounded really good with Courtney, but Courtney's got a voice that'll sound good on a toy mic. So I think that it was hard to tell until and Mickey likes this. He likes it more than the 102 on my voice. So there we go. Okay. Well, this is the mic.
Yeah. You're getting a 4 out of 7 head nods for the panel.
Yeah.
So
there we go.
I think it's a go. Yeah. Let's go to the next question.
All right.
Our next question comes from Mitchell Hill from Wilmington, Delaware. Are Samsung T5s still a thing?
Go ahead, Alex.
For us, they're still a thing because I've got small rigs that they slide into. So we still need to use the T5s because the form factor of the rig that goes around our cameras, our 6Ks, all have these little T5s there. They are getting a little long in the tooth, but we're still using them. They work fine.
I will say too that I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the T7s are not on the Blackmagic list for the ATEMs. The T5s are.
I think that the ATEMs can write to the T7s, but the 6Ks can. If you turn the 6Ks up and you're recording raw, the T7s have a different caching system that causes them to drop frames.
Copy that. Let's go to the next question.
Our next question comes from Peter John Goulden in Santiago, Chile. In After Hours breakout room, how do you set the screen such as the presenter is large enough to read the screen capture? Presenter in the center, not 16 up.
I'm
rereading the question. Go ahead, Alex.
I think you still spotlight in a breakout room. So you would spotlight the presenter, and that should be enough if they're doing a screen capture into it. Now, if they go into presenter mode inside of a breakout room, it'll take over the space. So like it would within a regular meeting, I believe.
Go, Jeffrey.
I also do dual monitor mode, so I can then pin to the second monitor. Now, if they're sharing a screen, that makes it tougher. But if you just want to see, like if somebody like John Preto was to put up a screenshot right now, I could bring it over and pin it to the second screen, and then make it as big or small as I wanted to.
Yeah, that's really important if you don't want to control the constraints of the meeting just to show someone a particular screen or a pin. And you still have, like Jeffrey said, you still have a pin left if someone's sharing a screen. Let's go to the next question.
Guy Cochran's on the hot button topic for today. What would you do with a Leica BLK360 LiDAR Scanner?
I forgot to raise my hand there. Well, I mean, I think that there are so many things that you can do with it. I think that's the big advantage is that I'm trying to show you a photo of what it looks like when we're using it while we were talking. Let's see here. Sorry here. Of course we were running around with a LiDAR scanner, and I'm just almost there. Here's a picture of it. Here's to hopefully inspire people to think about it. So that is that's the BLK360 at Anchor Watt. This is in Bayan Temple, and so we, part of the test that I've been, and I have this footage. I have these scans, and if people graduate to being good at the LiDAR that I do, I'll let you play with these scans. But we also have photogrammetry that matches up to a lot of this stuff as well. And so, but what you can do is grab all that data. When you think about how to do that's more exotic, but really being able to, when you think about tourism, when you think about doing, preparing or planning for events, when you're thinking about planning a rebuild of a studio, like I was in a big raw studio yesterday, a company called Vista Studios down in Playa Vista. That's part of what I was doing down in LA. And I walked in with the BLK is so small, it fits in your backpack. And said, "Hey, can I scan this?" Because they were like, "Sure." Like, "What are you doing?" And I just started scanning all the studios, all the stages. That's going to help us figure out, like, if we want to build a stage there, if I want to build a something or there, I know exactly where everything is. And I don't have to do any measurements. I don't have to do anything else. I just sit there and continue to talk about the space and talk with the owner and while the thing's working. And so we're just having a conversation, and it's just grabbing all the data. And I'm not sitting there spending the 2 hours with a laser pointer trying to figure out what, how wide it is or how high it is or whatever. I just let this thing run a couple times in the room, and I've got all the data that I need.
With the inferior scanners, Alex, can you just correct them? I won't spend a ton of time on this, but can you correct them by doing the work?
Yeah, that's just what you do by hand. You figure it out. And if you do enough scans, you're going to have enough accurate and inaccurate that you can usually get a pretty good, and you can slow the scanner down and make it more accurate. So what you do is you say, okay, I want you to, it'll oversample. So I'm doing little 5-minute scans because it's getting the information that I need. If I really want it to be high quality, I will turn the notches up on the scanner, on the BLK, and it will take now, it might, instead of 5 minutes, it might take 30 minutes or 40 minutes to do the scan.
Gotcha.
And so if if you're visiting somewhere, you do it at 5-minute scans. If it's your facility, you do 40-minute scans, and or you have time for it, or you're getting paid by the hour or whatever. So the but those are the things that you can turn that quality up and down. The new Leicas are amazing. I mean, I had the company that did the one that I was using was getting 2 million, or I think it was 2 million points a second. And he was just gave us incredible scans really fast. Those are the new high end Leicas are pretty nice.
That's great. Okay, what is, again, our survey? What would you do with your BLK? John?
I would scan the inside of our hospital. There's a lot of winding passageways, and we get a lot of phone calls of people who get lost. And to be able to know, especially if we could tag in their GPS location or some location with their phone or something, be able to see where they're at and walk them through the hospital step by step, I think would be amazing.
Well, and the key to remember there is whether you're using ultra wideband or Bluetooth LE. So Bluetooth LE will get you down to less than a couple feet. GPS is plus, it's 3 feet and above. Bluetooth LE is kind of in the 3-foot range, but ultra wideband is down to 6 to 10 inches. And so if you put ultra wideband systems into your hallways, and then you had a 3D space. And the other thing to remember is that you could also eventually do AR, where if they don't know where they just say, I need to go to room 221, and all they have to do is pick up their phone, and there's a big arrow that's stuck to the ground, where they can just go, oh, I see where I need to go. And it's easier to do that if you have the 3D information to work with.
Right, and GPS wouldn't go through our walls very well.
Exactly.
I just couldn't think of the name of the ultra wideband, so I just said what came to mind.
We're bringing Google Glass back.
Yeah,
Go, Jeffrey.
The funny thing is, last night I went to John Mulaney, and they basically told you couldn't have your phones or anything like that, and said the list of electronics, and said no phones, no smartwatches, no Google Glass. So, but for me, I think I'd start a brand new business, because this is something that realtors are always looking for. This is something for people just they want to get a good 3D scan of their area, but they don't want to have to pay for that. So, and then of course, Google Earth is always asking for LiDAR scans of trails and anything that their cars cannot get into. So that would be something that you could definitely do with that. Other than that, it's just an extra piece of geekery for me.
Let's go to our next question.
Alex Knight from Vancouver, Canada, returns with another question. Are there plans for a responsive design version of the Mukana panel view? I opened it this morning on my iPhone 13 Pro Max and couldn't see all of the rows of columns.
Go ahead, Alex.
I don't actually know how that's possible if you're watching, because it's just a video output, because you're seeing a video output there. I don't know how you couldn't double tap it or squeeze it so that it pops into, because all it is when you see the panel view. I guess if you're seeing it, if you were inside of our meeting, you would see it. But otherwise, what everyone's seeing in the webinar is just a video. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think he's talking specifically about the panel view on it.
But you mean so you mean like the panel view of us here? Yeah, that's Zoom. So we don't have any control over that. so
yeah.
Ask Andy when he comes on again. Save that question.
It's we can talk a little bit about it, and part of it's closed development. So we'll give you some tips off camera. Let's go to our next question.
Our next question comes from Mark Rensel in Tumwater, Washington. My brother purchased an unused M1 MacBook Air from a guy on Craigslist. It requires a DoorDash login password to use. OS reinstall fails to remove. All attempts to contact DoorDash via phone or email go unanswered. Any ideas on how to proceed?
Go, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I have a feeling that you got a stolen machine right there, because it sounds like that's a DoorDash thing. So I would go to the best thing to do is go to the Genius Bar and see, or your local Apple store, and see what they can do from there. There are ways to do it by sidestepping all the Apple's terms of services, voiding any warranties or anything like that. Sounds like you don't have a warranty on it anyway. So you can definitely give that a try. But that's I have a feeling that you've probably got something that you probably got scammed out of something.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, you bought a stolen laptop. Your brother bought a stolen laptop, and with the new M1s at the level of security, it's not only a DoorDash, it's a doorstop. Like there's no way to we had someone one time they stole one of our laptops and we have MDM on it. We had Meraki like in the BIOS. It was really funny. We go, I wonder what they're doing with our laptop today. Mostly played games, but it was a funny thing. Like we just had a backdoor to the laptop. Like, hey, let's take a look at what the laptop is, because it was stolen. So we didn't shut it off, but it was good for a year of entertainment.
So sorry, Mark. Your device is dead as a DoorDash.
Yeah.
Let's go to our next question.
Our next question again is from Craig McFarlane from Boston, Massachusetts. I use Apple's copy text from image daily, such as pulling text off a slide shared over Zoom. What have you used it for that might not be obvious?
Go ahead, John.
I use this a lot. I use it for VIN numbers on cars. I use it for serial numbers, taking pictures of serial numbers and taking those and copying those in and doing warranty information. I use it a lot.
Alex?
Phone numbers. Like if I see a phone number on something, I need to grab onto it, take a picture of it, or I need someone to fix something at my house. There was a truck going by. I mean, one of those vans that says we work on these things, and I was like, I just took a picture of it, selected it, called them. like I need you to come over here and fix something for me. You were just here.
Jeffrey?
I deal with a lot of people that live in South Korea. So my big thing is I will take an image and I'll actually do the translate from there. So that works really well, not only on Apple's side, but also Google Translate. They all do great jobs to do that. But basically, you have to scan the text to get the right translation, because sometimes if you just do what I see right now, all the words seem to change, especially when you're talking Korean.
Go to our next question.
Our next question comes from Robert Soji in Los Angeles. Sony versus Canon versus Panasonic. Which camera brand do you prefer and why?
All right, let's keep this civil. Go ahead, John.
You didn't specify video or still, but one of everything. I have a Sony, and you didn't mention Blackmagic. I have a Sony A7 III, and I've had Canon cameras in the past. They were great. I had Canon glass, and then the Blackmagic 12K. The nice thing about this, it has SSD built into the back next to the battery, and you slide in an SSD drive, and then I bring that and I put it in my Mac, and then I bring it right into Blackmagic. So it makes for a really easy workflow.
Alex?
I have to ask you, John, you have a 12K that you can, is that part of the back, the fiber back?
Yeah.
Do you know what the max write speed is on that? Is it still like a terabyte, gigabit a second?
I don't know. Good question.
It'd be good to test that. Like turn it to like 8K, 120, and try to see how low compression you can do and how fast you can push it for the SSD or NVMe in a case or whatever. But that's something we're trying to figure out. As far as comparing those, I think that I tend to lean towards Sony's. I like the color and the controls of the Sony. Panasonic for a long time cheated on the size of their chips and the resolution of their chips. And it really left a bad taste in my mouth. I don't think they do it anymore, but for a lot of us, we were always like, everything looked a little soft on a Panasonic. We couldn't figure out why. And they were really squirrely when we would ask them, like, what is the resolution of the actual chip? And so we just kind of started writing off Panasonic. But although I will say people who jump on here with a GH4, GH5, GH6 look amazing. So I think that, I do think that the Panasonic looks pretty good. The Canon, the big thing is the interface I've used the C300 a lot. The interface makes me absolutely crazy. I think the color science is good. It's great to use those lenses. The camera looks good, but wow, like push these two buttons down and then do this thing and then do this thing. And you're just like, oh my gosh, I have to just get the project done. And there's no amount of time that seems to make it better. My favorite camera to shoot video on is my favorite camera for used for the experience is the Blackmagic camera. I think the interface, the controls, the remote control, everything else is way better. My favorite camera to shoot on is an Arri. It's from a pure, like the color science, the dynamic range. It's just It's amazing.
Jeffrey?
I totally agree on the Canon, the interface. It's a great camera, but it was always a problem to set up and reset up if anything resets. So I use a lot of Sony, and for DSLRs, it was always Canon, and still is. But that's kind of changed a little bit. But what I really like about the Sony sensor, especially that Starvis, the Starvis 2 sensor, is they're showing up in webcams, and we're starting to see some pretty good looking webcams using that sensor.
I'll say something positive about all brands. Sony, I jumped on them because of their autofocus and low light sensitivity. Canon, their EF line of lenses were really readily available. What you got for the price of it was a real good bargain on their EF line. Now they've moved to the RF, so that's kind of reset. Before Sony lenses were always the premium between the ones that you've mentioned. And Panasonic has a really interesting feature. It's not global shutter, but it's one where you can take the full frame of a 4:3 image. And if you're trying to do something in a vertical scape, that might be something that you're interested in. Let's go to our next question.
Josh, Pentax K1000. Our next question comes from John Snyder from Reno, Nevada. How long does it take to scan a room with LiDAR?
Alex?
I have a patented answer. It depends. It depends on how much detail you want. It depends on how big the room is. So if it's a fairly large room, I mean, it could take all day. Now, let's say a movie theater, that might take maybe an hour to do it. You might do 8 to 10 scans in a movie theater to grab onto it. But a bigger room, a bigger room that doesn't have a lot of detail to it, might be only 4 scans. That might take you 25, 30 minutes. A large cavernous room that you want a lot of detail, you may spend the whole day there, like just scanning those things. And then what you're going to do is you use all the features in each one of those scans. A program like Recap will let you put those all back together, and they'll match those. You get them close, and they'll match all those features together. And so then it'll build one big thing from all of those scans. But it can be anywhere from a scan in 5 minutes, or maybe 2 scans in 10 minutes, up to a day or 2. It just depends on how many scans, and also what kind of scanner. Like, so if I use a BLK, I need more scans that are denser. If I use a ZNF, I can do it with less scans because I have far more resolution to work with. So,
go, Jeffrey.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Was isn't it also obstacles? But then you said a theater will only take 5 minutes. Is that with a theater
take 40
seating in it?
40 minutes to an hour.
But there's a lot of seats that are in the theater. So
I know, but you don't need. I only need one seat. Like, I don't need to scale. Like, I need one seat with detail. You build the seat out, and then you just replicate it. So when you're building them back out again, you just copy the seat. So you use the scan to figure out where the seat needs to go, but they're all the same. So you just got to figure out where they are. Yeah, occlusion is a big important. What Jeffrey pointed out, occlusion is important because you only see what the scanner. When you shoot a scan, you actually get the scanner shadows where it just suddenly goes out, and there's a whole bunch of detail that goes way out, but it's pure shadow because it just couldn't see anything past a doorway or whatever. But it's important. Like, when I scan, I'll always line up my scanner to the door, like a door that's going in there if I'm going to go into the next room, because the points that go through the door are a great way for you to find out, like, to lock one room to the other. Now, usually what I'll do is I'll do another scan right at the door between 2 different rooms. I'll put the scanner right there, and it'll capture as much as it can see of both rooms. Then I go and scan both those rooms, and that one is the glue that sticks those 2 rooms together.
Thanks, Alex. You probably saved us a lot of time with that workaround. Let's go to our next question.
Our next question comes from Jeff C. in Miami Beach, Florida. Does anyone have experience with the Elgato Wave Panels, Acoustic Treatment Panels? Goal is just to improve problem with echo in a home office for Zoom, etc.
Alex?
I just looked at them. I've never used them, but I looked at them. They look really cool. I think that they're probably a little expensive for what you're doing. So if you need to cover if you're putting something behind you that you want to bring down some stuff, bring down some reflection, they could be actually cool and they kind of look futuristic and so on and so forth. If you're putting something in front of you, you can use all kinds of things. I mean, what I used over the last 2 days when I was at a hotel was I took the bed sheet, the quilt, and it turned out in both hotel rooms I was in, there was a TV that I aligned the thing, and I put the bed sheet on the TV, like hung it so that it was just right in front of me to cut down on some of the reflection. So you can use moving blankets. I use some larger 4-foot by 2-foot Sonic's panels. They're less expensive per foot than the Elgatos, and they'll cover a lot of space pretty quickly. They look fine. Like I definitely have had them in my office, but I think that these wave panels look nicer. It just depends on how much you want to spend and how much area you have to cover.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
And they're gonna help with the high end thing of things. You want bass traps. You're gonna have to build out something on the corners to make sure that you don't have low end frequencies bouncing back at you.
Yeah, and you want to make sure you remember the difference between sound treatment and sound isolation. Echoing, no pun intended, what was said. If you need them in shot, that might be a consideration. But if they don't need to look pretty, there are definitely more economical solutions out there. Let's go to our next question.
Craig McFarlane's back with another question. Has anyone seen or used the app Husslup? It is a new production-oriented jobs market for short and medium-length work.
Go ahead, Alex.
A lot of people have done this in the past. The fundamental problem, it says, the Husslup on their website says from click, like a group of, like a click of people to click, like you can click on something and just find the people that you need. There's a reason that there's a click in Hollywood, and there's a reason that there's a clicks in production. And that's because you really need to know who you're working with. And you don't know that when you haven't worked with them before or worked with their friends or worked with other things. This is a pretty difficult market to grow in, to go into. Like there's Production Hub, there's a lot of other things that do this kind of thing. And the problem is you just randomly are grabbing someone. So sometimes you crew people that way, but not often. I think that if they get the right number of people, they might be able to do it. But so far I've seen this, people have been working on this for a decade and no one's cracked it because you need to know the people. And I have some ideas on how to fix that. And we may try to apply those ideas here in office hours at some point. But I think you need to have more information about those folks, and things that are just people putting something into a system isn't going to be enough.
Okay, let's go to our next question.
Getting to the mouse there. Our next question comes from Peter Belbin in Houston, Texas. Which early TV shows do you think helped advance production technology that's widely used today?
John?
I would say the Lucille Ball show with Desi Arnaz with the 3-camera shoot. There's, controversy over who actually originally created that, but they did some ground in front of a live studio audience too. They recorded it. So I think that show was pretty instrumental.
Alex?
I think that there were some that made things better and then some that really moved things down the road. And there's TV and then there's film. So those also changed those things out. But I think obviously MTV broke a lot of ground with reality TV that's still being inflicted on us now. But they're the ones that Real World was kind of where we started going down the reality pipe and figuring that out. And that really changed the genre dramatically. I think that Law and Order changed the structure. We got away from long arcs into individual arcs. There's no large arc, almost no large arcs in Law and Order, and that is why it's the most valuable property ever in TV, is because you didn't have to know anything about the show before or after. I'm always surprised that more people don't take advantage of that. But anyway, and then it makes it much more syndicatable. The young indie pushed a lot of boundaries in production between that Lucasfilm was learning from film. Young indie allowed them to iterate faster and figure out some of those bits and pieces. And then I think that. While it wasn't new for film, I think Alias, I'm watching Alias right now. My family is kind of working our way through it. A friend of mine did a lot of the matte paintings, and finding a way that you could do the level of matte paintings, and we'll bring him on, Eric. We'll bring Eric on and talk about matte paintings, but the amount of production that they were able to produce for that show to take you all over the world without ever leaving LA, or very rarely leaving LA. When you watch that film, remember that they shot that all in LA. Like, it's just, there's matte paintings, there's other things like that, and they did an incredibly good job at it. And and it's not all perfect in today's standards, but it's really good, and it created something. And I think it was the first film to really first TV show, and the reason that they were able to do that was because they had an incredibly skilled matte artist who came out of ILM, who's now was living up in the middle of nowhere, doing it on his own. And literally he did all the matte paintings for every show. So it was like, he literally sent him a hard drive and he just sent it back full of matte paintings that were all done. And it was highly efficient. I think it changed the way we thought about doing TV shows. Yeah.
Thanks. Great question, Peter. We could probably spend a lot of time on this one. Unfortunately, we've got to finish the show. My only add is that no thanks to whoever came up with Shaky Cam. Next question.
Next question is from Svetlana from Belarus. Good morning. My question follows yesterday's meeting and out of today's topic. Is there summary information about Apple's offices occupancy along various cities? And not only Apple's, but other large IT companies like Google?
Okay, John?
I don't know if there's statistical data on this yet, but pre-pandemic, many buildings were 70 to 85% full due to employee shrinkage, call-outs, vacation, that sort of thing, plus companies wanting to be able to accommodate future staff. Currently in the Reno, Nevada area, most office buildings seem to be about 50% full, and in the call center industry, most call center buildings are about 25% full because they're leaving people at home to work from home.
Thanks. Alex, real quick.
Yeah, there's not an official number, but you have to remember that a lot of these, there are lots and lots of these IT companies that are all over. There's teams at Apple that are in Pittsburgh, and there's Google. Google has 2 or 3 offices in London, and there's and like in Cupertino, there's the main campus, and then there's hundreds of other buildings that are Apple. So that it's really hard to put your finger on it, and they definitely don't want to publish where they are and where all those buildings are, and so on and so forth. Most of them are all unmarked.
Yeah. Next question.
Robert Shoji asks, what causes rolling shutter and why are some cameras worse than others?
Alex?
It's a lot more expensive to do global shutter. Global shutter means you have to charge the entire sensor at one time. So usually what happens is they just scan down and they do one line at a time as fast as they can, getting from the top to the bottom. All rolling shutters, it really depends on the frame rate that you're working at oftentimes. So the lower frame rate, you're going to see more of a jello vision. That's the technical term for it, the jello vision. Than you will at higher frame rates because it's scanning that sensor faster. But the global shutter is obviously incredible, but it's a much more expensive and much more complex chip because it has to do something to the entire sensor in one, and it basically has to scan super fast inside of the shutter speed, which is a thing. So,
bet you next year's kids are going to figure out a plug-in so they can get rolling shutter and their perfect global shutter cameras in the future.
And this was when we had CCDs, we were getting the whole thing. It's when CMOS is what got us.
Yeah. Let's go to the next question.
Chris Widener asks, are there any drop-in controller replacements for converting RC devices to IP control? I can build out an Arduino, but it would be an easier sell for a project if it was a commercial product.
Alex?
The only place that I've seen that is the remote control for the Blackmagic Micro Cinemas actually has, I believe it's an S8, is it S8 input? That you can actually use an RC controller to control its aperture and color and everything else. So, but it's the only place I've seen it in our area.
And our final question for our session.
Regular reader Mitchell Hill asks, it would be interesting for panelists to discuss what they use to watch TV or movies in their homes, just like MTV Cribs.
We won't spend a ton of time on it, but real quick, we'll get Alex and then Jeffrey.
Absolutely. How's that for quick?
Fantastic. Jeffrey?
Right now, I have my home theater is based Vizio, so Vizio 70-inch television and soundbar, 5.1 soundbar throughout. It's a small 25 by 12 living room, something like that. So
fantastic. And that concludes the end of our questions. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you all the panelists for your wonderful answers, as well as our larger community. Thank you, our producers, for giving us the great questions. We appreciate all the volunteers in the back that's make this show possible. If you're interested, visit our website. There's also links to where you can join the production of the show. We do a lot of our tweaking and testing on Saturdays. This is a good day to start new things, to try new positions, because we put into practice the things that we talk about for media and production. Also, we've gone a long way over the earth. Our follow-up traversal is 67,963 miles and 109,375 kilometers. So fantastic. We'll see everyone now in after hours.
That's a lot of miles.
So Dalalik has traversed 67,963 miles, and he will traverse 67,963 miles more.
And I will walk 67.
Just to be the one.
Yeah, exactly.
Mitch isn't here. You don't have to whisper.
That would be funny if we stopped whispering